Hi, sorry.
Hello. Well, we've got a lot of people joining us. I think we might reach 500 on this call tonight. But it's so fun to see so many names coming through. And I hear the beautiful sound of those bells in the Breslin Tower, which tells me it is 5:30. And so I think I'd like to get started. I am Susan Askew. I'm class of 86 of the college, and I am the Associate Vice President for Alumni and Parent Programs. And this time of year always makes me want to say that I would trade places with you students for 4 more years at Sewanee in a heartbeat. So we're very excited to be able to welcome you all back this fall. And with that comes a lot of questions and a lot of uncharted territory. And so tonight we are going to hear from our Vice-Chancellor, who will kind of give us an overview for the plans and how that will work. And we've had many questions from you all, and I think he is going to answer most of them in his remarks. But when he's finished, we will be able to delve into some questions that maybe he has not covered. And if you did not submit questions ahead of time, you can use the Q&A feature below. And that way we can track those questions, because I can tell you right now, we are not going to be able to answer all of your questions. Some of them were a little more narrow in focus. And so we still want to answer them, and we'll follow up with you all. And then even after we're finished tonight, if you still have questions, please email me, or you can email SewaneeParents@sewanee.edu. I'll put that in the chat later. But we want you all to have the information that you need. So just feel free to ask any question that you have. But we're very excited to hear about the plans from our Vice Chancellor. I'm going to quickly introduce him. He's our 17th Vice Chancellor, Reuben Brigety. And he is just wrapping up, I think tomorrow, maybe 1 month on the job. And I'm sure it's not the way he pictured it. It's not at all the way he pictured his first meeting with you all. And I just can't wait for you all to meet each other in the traditional way. But he is a Southerner from Jacksonville, Florida, and he went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and he got his master's and PhD from the University of Cambridge. And he's a former U.S. ambassador to the African Union, and most recently the dean of the International School of the George Washington University. And we're thrilled that he's here. He is going to be joined by his family, who I don't think he has seen in that month's time, and his wife and his 2 sons, and they will move into Chen Hall here on campus. And I'm going to turn it over to him, but I wanted you all to know that this was very important to him. He wanted to have this meeting with you all to be able to meet you, and then to just share the overview for what the plans are for this fall. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome, Vice Chancellor.
Right. Thanks, Susan. And good evening, students, families, friends. It's an honor to have an opportunity to sit down and speak with you virtually. As Susan mentioned, I thought it was very important for you all to hear from me directly, and for us to have a dialogue directly about what this coming semester is going to look like, as well as to answer any questions that I may have, and also hopefully to alleviate any concerns or anxieties you may have. So let me begin from the beginning. The reason, obviously, we're having this conversation, and the reason that we are contemplating these extraordinary measures, is because we're living through extraordinary times. And I think it's important for us to all level set on the threat that we are facing. The novel coronavirus is real. It is very deadly. It is also very communicable. Young people, yes, you can get it. Yes, you can transmit it. Yes, you can develop COVID-19. And yes, you can develop very serious complications from COVID-19 that could require hospitalization. Many of you may know that my wife, Dr. Leela Selassie, is an ICU physician, and she has been a frontline general in this fight against COVID-19, treating an ICU ward filled with nothing but COVID patients since March. And as you may also know, we've lost 2 members of our family to this disease, both in their 50s. And so the challenge confronting us is very, very real. On the other hand, because we don't know when a vaccine will be widely available, which is the only thing that will get us back to normal, we have to figure out collectively, certainly as a university community, and I would argue as a society, how to live with this virus while also trying to keep ourselves as safe and as healthy as possible. So it's with that in mind that we have been working extremely hard to try to answer this question about how we can come back together on the mountain safely and continue the approximate as closely as we can that special alchemy that is the Swanee experience for education and personal growth. It's important to know, or to note as well, that even as you may be observing what other schools are doing, in some ways those comparisons are of limited utility because each school is in a very different set of circumstances, both geographically, perhaps financially, culturally, in terms of what they can do with their student body. So for example, I can tell you that what my alma mater, the Naval Academy, can do in terms of enforcing compliance and sealing off its boundaries is very different from what other universities can do. So as an example, for what our sister school on the other side of the state, Rhodes, announced today that they will not have any in-person instruction this fall. They are going 100% remote. Other colleges like Harvard and Princeton have announced that they are going largely remote, and they're having some students on campus, in some cases only the freshmen, or some cases freshmen and only juniors, and then only sort of staggered and whatnot. Basically, all I'm saying is that there are some schools that aren't even going to attempt to open because their circumstances won't allow it. For us, our geographic isolation is simultaneously an asset and a challenge in our collective response to the novel coronavirus. It is an asset because we will be able essentially to create a bubble, more or less, once we allow people in and ask students to stay here, that will hopefully limit the transmission of the virus. And I'll say more about that in a minute. On the other hand, it's a liability. There are exactly 37 ICU beds within a 25-mile radius of All Saints Chapel. That is not a lot. And so to the extent that, and they're not all for us, they're not just for Swanee people, right? I mean, they're for everybody in the entire Tri-County area. And so our ability to be able to treat people that develop COVID-19 and develop really quite serious symptoms from it is limited. And so with that in mind, we have developed an approach that's based largely on 2 things. One is individual responsibility on the one hand, and the other is collective community response on the other. Individual responsibility practices the 3 W's. Wear your mask, wash your hands, watch your distance. We have, on July 3rd, since I am also mayor of Swanee, I issued a masking order saying that any person who's on the domain, whether it be a student, faculty, staff, visitor, has to wear a mask unless one of 4 things is true. 1, unless they are alone, as I am in my office right now, or as Susan is in her office. 2 is if you're asleep. Third is if you're actively eating and drinking, not that you're hanging out at the bar for shenanigans for 5 hours, but you're actually physically putting something in your mouth, drink, and cover your mouth again. And the fourth is if you are maintaining 6 feet of physical distance. So you put your arms out to the side, the people who are with you put their arms out. If you can't touch, you're probably good. And even then, you should wear a mask if you can. Community response is what we are doing as an administration to help bolster all of this. So it depends. The first point of effort is a testing regime that we're putting in place. So we can test everybody when they first come back, and then have surveillance testing of both particular groups. So for example, staff that live in Chattanooga and are sort of coming back and forth, or anybody else that or sports teams, for example, as they're practicing, so we can continue to test them. Or if we have a positive test and we need to contact trace back to see who else that person has had substantial contact with, contact meaning being less than 6 feet away from somebody for more than 10 minutes at a time, like say your suite mate, for example. And so we have partnered with a company called Baylor Labs in Chattanooga that has provided us the capability, we believe, to be able to turn around about 200 samples a day on a 4 to 6 hour turnaround. So we are stress testing that capability now with all of the staff and faculty who are here at the university. So for example, I got my test this morning. It's a saliva test, so it's not the nasal swab that you push down your nose, which is more rapid, but it's uncomfortable. You can survive it if you had to. Trust me, I did it. This is a saliva test. You basically sort of put your saliva in a tube and they send it off to the lab. I'm negative. Thank you very much. And so our ability to open is 100% dependent on our ability to test. Because if we cannot test, then it's like we are walking through a minefield blindfolded. So that's the first effort. And then also on top of that is our ability to quarantine and isolate. So once somebody tests positive, the first thing that has to happen is they go to quarantine. Quarantine means basically you go either to your dorm room or you go home. Our strong preference is that if you live within a day's drive and you are asymptomatic and you test positive, then your parent or somebody comes pick you up, or if you have a car here, we're discouraging that, but if you have a car here, that you drive yourself home. Why? For 2 reasons. One, as I said, we have limited capacity here on the mountain to address substantial complications from COVID-19. So if you test positive, just because you test positive for the virus does not mean you will develop COVID-19, but you can. And we have no idea why some people develop COVID-19 and why some people don't. And we have no idea why some people develop very mild symptoms and other people are fighting for their life on a ventilator. And so we have to we need to preserve that capability, say, for example, for international students that can't fly back home, or for seminary students for whom this is their home, literally. You know, they brought their families here for the duration of their seminary studies. So you go to quarantine for 14 days, or when you have a negative test. And so in addition to quarantine, there's also isolation. So once you are in quarantine, and if you develop symptoms for COVID-19, we will then put you in isolation. We have an agreement with St. Mary's Convent that gives us about 100 rooms there, which will allow us to be able to monitor people who have COVID-19, but who have mild to moderate symptoms, meaning they do not require hospitalization. But will allow us to monitor them such that they should require hospitalization, and we can evacuate them to one of the hospitals in the area so that they can be treated for COVID-19. Once you are in quarantine, you will still be able to take classes if you're asymptomatic, which then gets me to the next point about how we're actually going to be doing all of this. So We will be offering classes both in person and online. We are obviously changing the way in which we're doing in-person classes. All of our classroom spaces will require 6 feet of distancing at least between everybody in the room. We are pitching very large kind of party tents, like 8 of them around campus, which will give us additional outdoor facilities for instruction. We have hired additional janitorial staff to help clean and wipe down all of those areas between classes as much as possible to keep those areas as clean as we possibly can. About 1/3 of our classes will be taught online exclusively. And the reason for that is that we've given our faculty an option to decide whether they are comfortable teaching in person or they are not for whatever reason. Either they may have an underlying health condition themselves that makes them more susceptible to developing COVID-19 if they get the coronavirus. Maybe they have an immunocompromised member of their family at home. Maybe they're of advanced age, whatever it is. So we polled all of our faculty, and about 1/3 of them will be teaching online. All of our classes, whether they are taught by a faculty member who's in the classroom teaching in person or taught by a faculty member who's teaching online, will have what's called a synchronous component, meaning that just like you and I are talking live right now, they will have classes that will have a synchronous component as well, either a live lecture like this, or it might be a flipped environment where a lecture is recorded. Say, for example, you're studying calculus, right? Think Khan Academy, right? Where you are actually kind of viewing how to do a certain problem set. And then there'll be a synchronous time like this where you're with a few of your students, your fellow classmates and the instructor, and you can actually work through problems together, as an example. In addition to academics, I know you also all are wondering what social life is going to look like. And the answer is it's going to be different. We have asked Lauren Goodpaster to work with all of your fellow student leaders to figure out ways in which we could have socially distant social activities in the Greek system, in the international system, university-wide activities, et cetera, that allow you to still enjoy each other's company and enjoy that level of camaraderie. But also maintain our required public health guidelines. And so they're all working together very hard with your input, with the input of your peers to think through how we can do that successfully. Athletics. Our Southern Athletic Association, which is our conference, decided and issued a statement. Well, it will become official. They'll issue it in about 14 minutes, but all the presidents met earlier today. And we have all voted not to have conference play. Both because it's just impossible to figure out how you can play some sports like football, but also because just the mere act of traveling is another potential vector for the disease. And so we will not be participating in intercollegiate athletics this fall. Instead, our athletic director and coaches are all working very hard to come up with ways in which our teams, various types, football, golf, tennis, et cetera, can continue to practice, can scrimmage together, can continue to work out, can continue to hone their skills, and continue to bond and build as a team in the midst of this environment, as well as our intramural sports and club sports as well, so they can continue to work. Now, let me say 2 final things before I take your questions. We all have to get very comfortable with the notion this semester is going to look like no other semester in the history of the university. These aren't the cards that we wanted. It's not what we'd prefer, but it's here. It's no different from the cards that were dealt to your great-grandparents who were hoping to have a good time in their late teens, early 20s, but instead were called to duty in World War II, or had to decide where they stood on the issues of the day, like Vietnam or civil rights. We are here. And so we have to find a way through this together. The only way in which we can do this is if we all come here, we all agree to be bound by all of these public health guidelines and strictures. Remember I said that we're creating a bubble. We need everybody to protect the bubble. Protect the bubble. And does that mean that you won't be able to go visit your friends at UT or Emory? Yes. It means they won't be able to come here either, because that will break the bubble as another vector for transmission. Does that mean that your Greek parties are going to have to be different and you're going to have to maintain 6 feet of separation? We're going to have to figure out like how you do that? Yes. Does it mean that you absolutely cannot go and have a bootleg party at the forestry cabin on the backside of the domain? Yes, that's what it means. Because here's the thing. The virus will not keep your secrets. The virus doesn't lie. And if we have community spread here on the mountain, meaning that we have exponential spread with a transmission rate greater than 1 for an extended period of time, and we see that the hospital capacity in our region is being taxed, I will not hesitate to shut down the mountain. I will send everybody home who can go home, and we will lock down this university. Now, as I say, there are some universities that see all this whole set of circumstances and they're throwing in the towel before they even start. They're not even trying. This is a time that calls for resilience and resolve. I absolutely believe that we can be one of the very few universities in America that is able to make it through this and make it through an entire semester if we all pull together. And so as you're deciding, is it worth it coming back, right? Why don't I just wait till things get back to normal? Let me say this final thing to you. When you come back to the mountain for your 30th reunion, I can promise you, you're going to want to be one of the ones who, when the university was going through this unprecedented time of challenge, stood up and came together and did the right thing so we could truly all dwell together in unity. And if you do your part, we will do our part, and we will get through this with grit and grace. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Thanks for that overview. We ended on the note about making a very, very good case for staying here. There's still a lot of questions about what if they do decide to take some time off, their financial aid or any scholarships they have, or their admission that has been granted to them. Is that all intact?
It's all intact. We won't penalize anybody if they decide simply to take a gap year under these circumstances.
Great. I don't think you said it out loud, but I think everybody realizes that we are not having family weekend this fall, or lessons and carols, homecoming, those things. But we do like to celebrate a milestone that many students make, which is earning their gown, which is an academic honor that I'm sure you already know. But so how will we be able to celebrate that this fall?
Yes, we will be doing gowning ceremony on the football field, and we will live stream it. With appropriate social distancing, to ensure that particular tradition and milestone is honored.
That's great news. So you talk about the Swanee bubble and protecting the bubble, which really means staying in the bubble as much as we can. And so there have been many questions about limited resources here if they are not able to even venture, maybe to the pig or somewhere. And we know we have the Swanee Market that offers things, and we'll have the new Wellness Commons maybe open with another little option for some provisions, but and dining alternatives. Can you talk a little bit about how the bubble might be expanded during this time?
It won't be. The bubble's the domain. I can't say this strongly enough. There are reasonable questions and concerns about, for example, provisioning, right, at CVS or Piggly Wiggly. And we will, and Susan will remind me that we will work with our fall operations group team to figure out through the pig or whomever else, can we arrange like a grocery delivery service or whatever, right? Like you would have in a more populous city. That's a reasonable question. And we will figure that out, because quite frankly, I would much rather see us arrange a contract service with Piggly Wiggly or the closest wherever, Walmart or whatever, take people's orders and have one person drive up with a truck and have all those things delivered on here in parcels, than I would to see 500 students at various times over the course of a week going back and forth, whatever. The name of the game is decreasing contacts. And look, if you take a look at what's happening across the South right now, this virus is exploding. The state of Mississippi is exporting COVID-19 patients because there are literally not enough ICU beds in the entire state to care for the caseload now and what is coming the next couple of weeks. The state of Florida, my home state, has more coronavirus patients than the entire European Union combined. And so what we're trying to do is to work to create options. So for example, what's in the bubble, right? Swanee Market's in the bubble, right? Shenanigans is in the bubble. The Blue Chairs is inside the bubble. When we were, trying to think of other options for having kind of pop-up tents and pop-up, pop-up restaurants or whatever, right? Using the classroom tents over the course of the weekends and things so that people have other options besides simply going to a clerk, which is fantastic. Best dining hall in all of America. But I get it, right? I mean, you obviously want some, variety and do different things. And we're trying to sort of figure out how to be able to do that. But we have got to maintain the integrity of the bubble. It is our only shot as much as possible, both to maintain it and then to test frequently so that we can backtrace anybody who tests positive, because it will happen, and therefore arrest it and stop the transmission of the virus as soon as we can.
I'd like to go back a little bit on to the social life, which I can't wait for you to see it in action, because I just really feel at Swanee it's very inclusive and very creative for basically because of the lack of other things. But so I know you're encouraging still a vibrant social life with some restrictions. And I will say somebody was very impressed that you already knew where the forestry cabin was. But so there are a lot of questions on the enforcement of all these restrictions. And I know that we just need to really all be in this together, and these students are coming to us and we're going to try to treat them as adults. But can you talk a little bit about enforcement?
We are all just getting to know each other. Okay? None of you, very few of you, I think, have met me in person yet. I certainly have not met most of you. We're all kind of learning how we operate. So I want you to take this in the spirit of Uncle Reuben telling you what is necessary. Here's the thing. We have to protect the bubble. And neither I, nor my staff, nor our police team can be playing cops and robbers trying to chase down people that are trying to find a way around the rules. So let me, from my heart, honest to goodness, let me tell you this. If you decide to come here, I want you to be committed to joining us to protect the bubble. And I can promise you that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. If you find these rules too onerous and you feel that it's just not the college experience you wanted, I'll give you an alternative. Take your classes online, and you and your buddies go rent a beach house in Myrtle Beach or in St. Augustine somewhere. Party to your heart's content. I will wish you good luck and Godspeed and hope you don't need an ICU room and a ventilator. But I very much hope that you will find it within yourself to step up and do what is necessary in this time. And I promise you this, I promise you, when this is all over, we will have a party to beat the band. It will make Coachella look like a funeral. I promise you. But for now, we have to do what we have to do. And I promise you, you will be so very proud of yourselves for getting through this together.
There's been a lot of questions about, I know you explained the testing and that it's a saliva test,
Yeah.
But the question keeps coming up about, might there be false positives and how often, what's the frequency of testing? And along those same lines is how isolated into their dorms are they? Can they be in other dorms?
Yeah.
Just all that.
Right. So you're more likely, so it's a PCR test, a saliva test, you're actually more likely to get a false negative than a false positive. And the reason is that let's say, notwithstanding our recommendation that you quarantine yourself at home for 14 days, you hang out with your buddies at home for one last hurrah before you come to the mountain. And one of them has coronavirus, and you're in close proximity with him, you breathe in, the virus is in your body. And then you come up to the mountain to test. It is likely you would test negative because you have not developed significant enough viral load in your body for the test to detect it. So you could test negative when you show up, and then if we tested you 6 days later, you test positive. And by the way, once you are positive, which meaning once you have sufficient viral load but you're still negative, you can still transmit the virus, even if you feel fine, if you're asymptomatic. That is why wearing a mask is so important. Now, with regard to like whose dorm where you can go in and how you can sort of interact or whatever. So we have this concept called family unit. So if you're in, the same suite for people, or you're on the same floor in a frat house, whatever, these are the same couple of people with whom you can be unmasked, like while you're hanging out, whatever, getting your things done, right? But otherwise, you need to wear a mask when you're in somebody else's room, when you're in somebody else's presence. Why is that? Because if you test positive, remember, we're going to do contact tracing. Anybody else you're in contact with, meaning closer than 6 feet, more than 10 minutes at a time, like your roommate, they're going to have to get quarantined as well, even if they test negative straight off the bat, because again, what we just said about viral load developing. That's the only way in which for us to stop the virus. Let me give you an example of something that just happened just last week. We had a young woman who graduated and was on the fire department here. She came back just last week to see her buddies at the fire station. She was coronavirus positive and knew it, and didn't tell her buddies at the time. Found out subsequently. And therefore, we had to quarantine 2 of our firefighters before to ensure that they weren't transmitting the virus, and they still had to be tested. Their first test results just came back negative, so we think they're okay. And we had to decontaminate the entire fire station. Inexcusable. Absolutely inexcusable for somebody like that who knew they were positive, who was a firefighter EMT, who should have known better, came back and not only infected 2 other people, but implicated and compromised our ability to respond to emergencies on this mountain, and therefore potentially compromised other people as well. This is why I say, if you really believe in Ecce Quam Bonum, if you really believe in EQB, this is the test. So you really need to be able to step up and think about keeping our entire community safe when you come back.
Thank you. Many of you parents may know we did a session of this earlier, and the reason I'm going to ask you this question, even though I don't know if you'll know the answer, but we didn't get this question before, but we've gotten it at least 10 times tonight. parents are concerned about prescription medicine, and I'm sure we will work that out, but do you know how that will be handled?
Sure, it's a great question. To be honest, I have not thought about it. There may be other members of our team who have. What I can tell you is this: understanding the nature of the challenge that we are facing, we hired 2 public health officers, something Swanee has never done before. The first is Dr. Mary Heath, who has an MD and a master's of public health from Tulane. She actually has a pediatric practice up here, but has done all public health work elsewhere. And the second is Mira Gingrich, who also has an MPH from Johns Hopkins. And whose job it is to help us think through all of these sort of public health issues in order to help take the strain off of our student health services so they can continue to focus on these sorts of questions. It's an entirely fair question. When we're done with this, we'll go back to the provost and ask her how we can expect our students to resupply their medications while also protecting the bubble. I appreciate you raising that with us, and we'll certainly take it on board.
Thank you. I think that most students got the news about their classes and what their schedule looks like. I know you've touched on that there'll be some online, there'll be a combination of in-person classes and online. If they are virtual, will all the students go somewhere to watch it together live, or will it be recorded? There seems to be a lot of questions about that.
Sure. I mean, the idea is that if my understanding, we'll go back and check that if a class is virtual, meaning a professor is not there, then we will not have physical classroom space for that, right? Because at the end of the day, you would simply just be there on your laptop, on the Zoom call, just like we're doing right now. So people would do that from wherever they may be, whether they want to be on a Adirondack chair, on the quad, or in the dorm room, or in the library, or wherever else. Now, I will say I saw 1 or 2 people saying that their student they're coming back, but they have all 4 of their classes online. That is not our intent. So what I will ask is if you would just email Susan, ask you your name and your students and their student ID number. We will go back and see what accommodations can be made in terms of switching sections around or whatnot to make sure that you do not have all classes online. I can't guarantee that they'll all be in person, but I take your point, and we should figure out how to make sure they're not all online.
I had a question come through about the wellness commons, and will that be active by the time they come back? I saw it today. They've taken the fence down. It looks fantastic. Yeah. And maybe touch on the bookstore too.
Sure. So the bookstore for sure will be open. They're actually moving merchandise and stuff in there as we speak. The Wellness Commons, I think, had its last fire marshal inspection today. I assume it passed. No one's told me it hasn't. And we are certainly expecting the wellness portion of the Wellness Center, meaning the counseling and the other sort of stuff, to be open by the time students come back. There's still a question, a challenge of how do we operate the gym space, not only there, but also for Foster. Oh, is that it? The gym? Did I get the name right? Was it Fowler? Yeah, cut me some slack. I'm the new guy, right? Something, I got it right, like with the F. And because it's the same problem all across America, right? I mean, the most difficult places for transmission are bars and restaurants, and also challenges for how do you work out. Look, I'm a huge believer in the importance of exercise, both for physical fitness and mental well-being. So we want to do our best to figure this out, and we don't know if it means that everybody has to wear an athletic mask where they're in, or if we actually limit the number of people that are in the gym areas at any given time, and we set up barriers between workout apparatus. We don't know yet. We're still working it. You're like, how can you not know? It's because no one in America knows. We're still trying to figure it out, and to make sure that everybody is safe as possible. But we will. And here's the other thing. It's also very important too that somebody asked me. In a public health crisis like we're in right now, it's the most significant our country has faced in a century. You almost know, that if your local authorities are doing things right, if at the end of the day it feels like they overreacted. Because they take all these measures and very few people are sick. And it seems like, well, gosh, they just kind of like overshot the mark. Well, no, actually, I mean, clearly they're doing a lot of things right, which is why so few people got sick. And so, but we're going to learn things as we go along, right? We'll learn things from our own experiences. We'll learn things from the experiences of other colleges. I don't expect that you will see, well, we'll see. We are putting in place all the measures we know of right now to be able to have a residential experience that is as close to the normal Swanee experience as possible, while also putting measures in place to stop transmission along the vectors that we know it travels, so that we can stay here the whole semester. The nightmare scenario is that we have exponential spread of this virus on the mountain that we cannot track and we cannot stop. That is no bueno. And so we need to figure out how we all come together to adhere to these standards. And quite frankly, you know, part of the challenge is going to be if we get midway through the semester, we've had very few cases. Everybody thinks like it's no big, right? And then people start to relax. Then the second half is going to be very ugly. And so we have to keep our guard up for the duration if we want to be able to stay here together on the mountain through the end of the semester.
So that was going to be my next question is, what would be the scenario that would cause you to make that decision? And then on the flip side, if things were to possibly really improve, what would make you decide to lift the restrictions?
Sure. So the two criteria that we'll be watching most closely to determine if we're in danger are the transmission rate and the hospitalization rate in our area. So basically the transmission rate, the R naught or R sub zero. If the transmission rate is 1, meaning one person is affecting every other person, that means you have steady state transmission of the disease. It keeps going. You're not getting dramatically worse, but you're not getting any better. In order for the disease to stop spreading, the transmission rate has to be less than 1. And remember, we're not talking about transmission rate in Tennessee or in Grundy County or Franklin County. We're talking about transmission rate on the domain. That's why we hired 2 new Masters of Public Health officers, 2 new public health officers, each with MPH, to help us do this. So we understood, so we know what we're looking at. If the transmission rate is greater than 1, meaning for every 1 person, you're infecting 1.5, 2, 3 people, maybe 4, that is really bad. That's what leads you to those exponential curves up. And that's how you can go from 1 case to 4 to 16 to 64 in a matter of days or a couple of weeks. And so if we see a sustained rate of greater than 1, and we see the ICU capacity in our area, in the Tri-County area, decrease, we will go to lockdown and evacuation. And so the question is, when can we let off on some of these restrictions? The answer is basically probably not. I mean, not until we're done, right? I mean, not until we're close to the end of the semester and we're done. We're sending everybody home and we're successful. The flip side is that if, notwithstanding everything we're putting in place and all the hard work we're doing to create a meaningful experience for all of our students and keeping them safe, that there are those who are still not committed to protecting the bubble, and we see a growth of this disease, whenever that is, whether it's mid-September, end of September, early October. If I see those indicators spike like that, I will do what is necessary to keep our community safe, and we'll go to lockdown and I'll send people home.
I've been seeing this question, a kind of recurring question, and I have a son and you're a parent, so I understand the question, but many people have asked about the dorm move-in, and I think maybe they've received word that the child moves themselves in, but I would expect there will be volunteers on campus helping them, but do you know any more about that?
I do, and so I understand, particularly for those of you who are parents of first years, that this is an incredibly special moment. You remember when this kid was born, remember when they had their first teeth, took their first steps, first went off to kindergarten, prom, all those milestones. And they were literally walking off to adulthood, and you would hope to be there with them, perhaps as your parents were with you. And I understand genuinely how wounding it can be to say that, no, we're not going to let you cross the threshold with them and drop them off in their dorm room. And the reason is, again, that we have to protect the bubble. Every single person we have to assume has the coronavirus unless tested. Well, then you're like, okay, well, fine. Why not just test me? And the reason is that there is limited capacity at the lab that we're working with to test. So if we're expecting 200 students and we allow each of them to have 2 parents, and that's therefore 600 people that need to get tested in order to protect our ability to engage, we literally do not have that capacity. We can't do it. And I would encourage you to take a look at what's happening with testing times and response times all across the South to give you a sense of how challenging that is. Now, let me give you 2 other stories. So I graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, which, like Swanee, is steeped in rich in tradition, its own various milestones. And perhaps the most significant milestone, or one of the most significant, is plebe summer. So when you show up to be sworn in as a new midshipman to begin your essentially your basic training, you get to Annapolis. Many of us had, like I did, had my parents drop me off, and you go in, fall into the indoctrination machine for the first day. You get your uniform, your head shaved, all this sort of stuff, and then you come out, you take your oath, you have 5 minutes to say goodbye to your mom, and then off you go. And then you go into this black hole for 8 weeks. Maybe you get to call your parents like once a week, at least you did back in the day. And at the end of plebe summer is Parents Weekend, one of the great traditions of the Naval Academy. All your parents come. Last time they saw you, you were shaved, with no hair and this kind of like funky sailor uniform. Now, you have your summer whites, your shoulder boards, your combination cap with a gold braid. You are like legit. You are a midshipman. It's incredibly meaningful. And the United States Naval Academy this summer canceled plebe summer Parents Weekend for the first time in history, because there's no way they determined that they can protect the bubble and keep everybody safe with all these people coming from all over the place, and still maintain the health of the midshipmen and everybody else. And lest you think that I'm being, capricious, let me tell you a story from my own family. So as I told you, my wife has been fighting this disease in an ICU for months now. My wife's from Ethiopia, and her parents, who were they split their time between Ethiopia and the United States. And when we saw the virus exploding, we saw the U.S. closing borders, we brought them back to the U.S. in March, just in time before they stopped international flights, got them tested, make sure they didn't have the disease, et cetera. And so they've been here in my wife's brother's place, not far from us in Northern Virginia. We didn't see them for weeks initially, then we started to see them a little bit, all masked and whatnot. They're 80 years old. And so my wife asked me, could her parents come see us and spend time with us here at Swanee when I moved in? I said no, because we have to protect the bubble. And given how long this virus is going to go on, given my in-laws' advanced age, my wife rightly wonders when, or even if, she'll see her beloved parents again. I can promise you that was not an easy conversation in our house. But we are doing what we have to do. And so I completely respect how hard this is for you to drop off your kid and not be able to walk with them. It's why also we're asking them to bring the bare minimum to their dorm rooms, both so it's easier for them to move in, and so in the eventuality I have to evacuate them out, and it's easy for them to get out and take their belongings with them quite rapidly. This virus is forcing very cruel choices on all of us. It's striking at the very heart of what makes our community a community. And yet we have to make do and get through it until such a time as we can get back to life as we once knew it.
I think it's safe to say you've been crystal clear, but can we just be a little bit more specific? I think they're going to be mourning the Mountain Goat Market. People are asking about drive-through restaurants, or in attending a job off campus or church that is off campus.
You got to protect the bubble. Here's why. Here's why. Every one of those things is a vector for another disease. We're bringing all of you back from all across the country, many of you from across the South, which is currently exploding with this virus. It's also, by the way, if you come and you arrive and you test positive, we have to send you right back home in quarantine. And some number of you will get through because you may have contracted the virus in the last couple of days, but don't have sufficient viral load. And therefore you'll start to spread it, notwithstanding everything we're telling you to do. So we need you to do your part and to think proactively, not but what if, not but can I, but to think instead, okay, how do I stay inside the bubble? I get it. I understand it's not, you know, that I can't go to Crystal's and get my favorite Crystal cheeseburgers, which I'm a fiend of, right? I get that. But I need to do what's necessary in order to keep us safe.
Thank you. There are some questions about the numbers of cases on the mountain. Can you share any of those details?
Sure. They're quite frankly very, very low at the moment. We have a daily dashboard, and if you, while I'm chatting, I'll sort of go back and take a look and see what they were the last couple of days. We regrettably had the husband of one of our colleagues who works in I think in the dining hall not only sort of test positive for the coronavirus, but developed COVID-19 and died last week. And she asked that we actually share that story so that everybody knows how dangerous it is. So the last dashboard shot I have is actually from the Tri-County area. It's actually from the 13th, and it says that there were total 116 coronavirus cases in Franklin County, 95 in Marion County, 65 in Grundy County, 143 in Coffee County, 3 deaths in Franklin County, 4 deaths in Marion County, and 2 in Grundy County. That was as of late last week.
There have been a few questions about athletics. We've just got time for a few more, but do you know if that season will be just canceled or maybe take place in the spring?
Sure. So we are making every effort to transfer those competitions into the spring. The challenge, not a challenge, it's just the reason that as a conference we can't say definitively that's going to happen yet is that the NCAA has to make a decision to say that's what's going to happen. They will allow us to do that. Those conversations are ongoing with the management committee of the NCAA. Now, I suspect, I can't promise, but I suspect that they will say yes, that you play football in the spring, and so essentially the season of the year is just flipped, right? So this is essentially a workout season and a workout semester, and then, you know, God willing, if we both learn how to deal with the virus better or something, that we can actually play sports in the spring, but, you know, one step at a time.
This is a new question, but so you may not have any plans for this, but it's election year and the students will be here on voting day. Do you know if we will make some kind of arrangements for the students to be able to vote?
We will just have to figure it out, right? And then the question is, you know, obviously there's some people that are voting absentee because they're still registered back home. We need to understand, you know, what number are actually registered here. Obviously, if you're registered here, I know people have, understand where the polling place is and whatnot. I suspect that we will take the same measures that they do all over the country in terms of social distancing in the polling place and whatnot. But yeah, it's an event. Anything that brings large numbers of people together is absolutely a potential vector for the disease. It's a challenge. And yet, I don't think we've ever had an election in a pandemic since at least the Spanish flu in 1918. And not even sure how useful an example that is for a host of reasons. So we will figure it out and go with best practices from other municipalities around the state.
Right, I'm going to give you a chance to just wrap it up, but I want everyone to know that this has been recorded and we will share this so that other students and families can see this. And a lot of questions were not answered, but I saw many of them where the answer is on our website. And so we'll follow up and direct you to those, all that information. And if it's not there, we're going to answer your question for you. But any last words, Mr. Vice Chancellor?
So again, I know that this is very challenging. I know it. And I also know that we have to find a way through. This virus is a beast. It is unrelenting. And I know that many people will say, well, life has risks. Of course, we have to sort of take our own risks and whatever. But this is not, you making an individual decision about whether or not you're going to go skydiving without a parachute or not. Because this virus is so communicable and any risk you may choose to take affects everybody in our community. It is the ultimate test about whether or not we can truly dwell together in unity. We can do this. We have a plan that can work, but the plan depends, absolutely depends on all of your collective behavior individually. And so I hope you'll take up the challenge. I hope you'll come back to the mountain and dwell with us. And I look forward to our massive Coachella-like celebration when we're on the other side of all of this. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And thank you for the parents, especially. We welcome the new students and parents, and we look forward to seeing everybody as soon as we can. But thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.